Hi there. Just a quick note before we get into today's episode. Super exciting news. We have launched brand shiny, spanking new social media channels across all platforms dedicated to the Hunger and Heart podcast. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and of course, YouTube. If you enjoy the podcast, please do follow us on your social media platform of choice. We will be releasing full episodes as well as clips, teasers, trailers, carousels, the works, you name it. Don't miss out. All right, let's get on with the show. I want to read for you a line from the Andrew Mehrtens Wikipedia page. What it says is, New Zealand rugby has had few players who have won such wide popularity and affection as Andrew Mehrtens.
So people see Jonah and they see a rugby superstar. People see Sean Fitzpatrick and they see a guy who's captained the All Blacks for a long time, carries himself with a lot of dignity, a huge amount of gravitas. I don't think I seemed anything special, you know what I mean? And I wasn't big and strong. I mean, I was tremendously good looking, obviously. I think people just saw like a normal kid. I like to think they kind of saw themselves, geez, if this kid could be out there running around with Canterbury or Crusaders, the All Blacks, then I can too. Not everybody liked me. I'm sure there were plenty of Carlos Spencer supporters, for example, and they would never see anything good about me, and there are a lot of supporters of me who would never see any good in Carlos.
You talked before about these guys feeling such a kind of brotherhood with them that you'd go out for a beer or a water, but you and I both know it was a beer, let's be honest. I'd love a story that would be wildly inappropriate in today's terms. What was it like for you building those relationships with those guys at that time? Hello, my name is Kyla Colbin, and welcome to Hunger and Heart, a podcast on the intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion. My guest today is Andrew Mehrtens. Mehrts is currently the second all-time test points scorer for the All Blacks with 967 points. He is behind only Dan Carter in that record. He scored 20 or more points in 13 separate tests, including 28 points in his All Blacks debut. He's currently the only player to have scored over 300 points in the Tri-Nations series, and his 209 points against South Africa is the most ever by a single player against a single country. In this conversation, we talk about the harsh feedback he got from Gilbert Enoka, his unique relationship with Justin Marshall, and his view on why he was so beloved during his career. You'll also learn how Todd Blackadder takes his tea in the morning. So here you are, my conversation with Andrew Mehrtens. Let's start at the very beginning. You obviously not born in Aotearoa. Tell me a little bit about your background, the Andrew Mehrtens creation myth.
Well, I mean, I'm about as New Zealander as you can be without being born in New Zealand. So my parents were both from rural or sort of semi-urban North Canterbury. Mum was from Kaiapoi and Dad was from Rangiora. And they went overseas about a year after getting married, and they chose South Africa. They were dying to see a safari and just have an experience. And while they were over there, they got in touch. The rugby network kicked into gear, and my father was contacted by another New Zealander, Peter Hatchwell, who was playing in Durban in Natal. And he said, come up here. It's fantastic. It's really good, rugby people. It's a good club. We can get your jobs here and sort you out. And so they were there for just over 5 years, at the end of which I was born. So I'm South African born and probably look less like a South African than anyone in the world, really. And so, but then I was only a year old when they came back to New Zealand, settled in North Canterbury again, and a little Māori school called Tuahiwi, little Māori town, or village really. So, my schoolmates in those early years were farmers' kids and Māori kids, and it was a bilingual school. My father really embraced Māori culture. Did it at university, took Māori at university and made sure that he implemented everything in Māori and English at Tuahiwi. So it was a pretty special little upbringing there in hindsight.
Can I just ask, what was it? Why was that? Do you know why it was important to your dad to embrace Māori culture?
No, I don't know. I probably never really got to the bottom of it. I think he loved the family emphasis and the sort of communal spirit of Māori culture. He had lost his father when he was 9 years old, so he'd grown up, going to boarding school or going to the Christchurch Boys High School hostel in Christchurch, and then he'd been some time in the army. Then he went through teachers college and became a primary school teacher. And I guess he was a little bit institutionalized, but I think one of the things I appreciated most about my father was the big heart that he had. And I think, partly it was the role maybe that he got when he got the position at Tuahiwi School as basically the sole teacher from standard 2 to standard 4 in those days, and was the headmaster, so he was a teaching headmaster. And I think he just thought, well, I'm really going to throw myself into it. This is the nature of the job, the nature of the village. And so yeah, I'm pretty glad that he did, because I grew up fairly atypically for a Pākehā kid, really. I mean, I know we've got a lot of Pākehā kids throughout New Zealand and rural areas who do get exposure to a lot of Māori and Māoritanga, so which is awesome. But yeah, I just felt, yeah, it was a pretty cool upbringing. I'm glad that it was rural, glad that it was with sort of connectivity to nature and stuff like that. Even going around to my mates living on farms and whatnot, and just getting just basic little things that interest kids.
You mentioned being a Pākehā kid growing up in this environment with exposure to Te Reo Māori, to Māoritanga. One of the things I'm really curious about, and it's often hard to know how, I mean, it's impossible for us to know what would have been or what could have been different. But I'm going to ask nonetheless, is there anything that you notice in terms of your experience that you go, oh, I relate to this experience of going overseas, or of, the way that you've approached your career differently, or how has that early experience shaped the way you have ended up living your life?
I think during my rugby career, because I was born in South Africa, and New Zealand had such a long history and passionate history against South Africa, I guess I was very attuned to that very quickly and pretty thoroughly. And I loved reading about the historical matches, the All Blacks tours to South Africa. Clearly when I was younger, I didn't realise the context in terms of apartheid, etc. But to read about the All Blacks that had gone over in 1960 and 1970 and 76. My father actually played against the All Blacks in 1970. He played for Natal Province against the 1970 touring All Blacks. So I loved that history, and it was a thrill for me to be playing rugby. And then more than a dream come true, really. It wasn't even an achievable dream of mine to be in the All Blacks, and yet suddenly there I was in the All Blacks and visiting South Africa in 1996 to play a tour there. And it was the first time that I'd actually been to the city of my birth in Durban. So while I was a New Zealander through and through, just it wasn't like I wasn't in near the place that I was born, and the first time going back there was really special in 96. I guess the concept of tūranga waiwai sort of thing, but even though it's outside Aotearoa, it was just a bit of a spiritual moment, I guess, going back to Durban. But then I guess I've just felt I don't know how it's shaped my approach to things. I think most of my approach to things has been shaped by my upbringing in Tuahiwi, just that sort of communal feel, and I guess New Zealanders are known for being sort of tall poppy, the tall poppy syndrome, and sort of overdone humility at times and stuff like that. But I think there's an aspect to that is a really good, strong aspect to it, and I'm not trying to label myself massively humble or anything like that, but I just think a lot of the Māori culture is about humility and about communal effort and that sort of thing. And I love the fact that I grew up in that environment.
You mentioned the term tūranga waiwai, and I'm always mindful that there might be folks listening who are not as familiar with some of these terms. Can you help for anyone who's not familiar with that term?
I think it's where in Māori birth, the afterbirth was buried when a child was born, and I think that's your tūranga waiwai. I mean, waiwai is legs or feet, and I think that's basically where you're planted Um, so I guess your spiritual home. And so I guess, where we're born is that place, whether it's Māori or otherwise. And so for me, Tuahiwi really is my original home, but being born in Durban in South Africa, that was, I guess I've got a couple of tūranga waiwai.
I love this concept. I always talk about myself having three home countries: the US, where I was born and bred, Aotearoa, where I make my home today, and then Argentina, where my mother grew up and my family's from, and this weird tea that I'm drinking is from. Um, and I'm curious with this concept of having multiples. For me, in the rugby, it's easy if New Zealand's playing the US, obviously. I'm supporting New Zealand. You hold the record for scoring the most points by a single individual against a country. And of course, that country is South Africa. Was there, like, I think about, Serena and Venus playing against each other. Was there anything in there in you that kind of came through with your connection to South Africa where you're like, I'm just gonna, like, almost like I'm gonna stomp my brother, or like, was that a factor at all, or was it just like, no, I'm just out there doing my job, and my connection to South Africa has almost nothing to do with it?
No, it was, look, I think um, playing for the All Blacks, you don't feel it's like doing your job. It's even though you're paid for it these days, it's a thrill, it's an honor and privilege, and all those things, and it doesn't feel like doing a job. But being in South Africa, I guess I just had something special. I knew the All Black history against South Africa, against the Springboks, and just being born there. So it always felt very special. It's a special rivalry, and we'll see that this year, obviously, when the All Blacks go there in August. But I don't know. I just felt it was really special. I felt even more lucky. I mean, I felt lucky really my whole career. I mean, to think that I've got that kind of a record. Given what Dan Carter did and scoring 1,700 or something like that test points, I mean, gee, that must have been spread out against absolutely everyone then, because, I guess it's a reflection of the number of games we played against the Springboks in a short period of time, really. A proud thing for me, but not something I necessarily think about every day. And I was lucky to be a couple of words on a page in this book that is the history of New Zealand and South African rugby relationships. So yeah, that's pretty special. But like I say, I don't go around thinking about it too much. I will for the next day. Now you've mentioned it, though, Kyla. I appreciate that.
Excellent. I'm glad to give you a little injection of like, oh yeah, I did do that. That's beautiful. I want to back up again a little to earlier in your career, and you kind of came onto the rugby scene what would be considered a little bit late in terms of being discovered as a standout prospect. Like, how did that unfold?
Well, it was a slightly different context back then. These days we've got academies and we've got talent identification right the way through from a very early age. And, back in those days we didn't have all the analysis and whatnot. And I was a later developer. And, down in the South Island we had probably smaller numbers, just through population. We had, obviously very proud provinces right throughout the South Island, but just not the numbers. And so when you're playing juniors or when you're playing schools rugby, you probably don't get as much opportunity when there are these big schools up in the North Island, Kelston and Wesley and Auckland Grammar Kings and Te Aute and St Stephen's and all these massive schools. I mean, so many, I've probably done some a disservice by not mentioning them in that little group. But, so I think in the era that I played, you could fly a bit under the radar for quite a long time. And, for a lot of players in New Zealand and I'm sure in South Africa and other rugby mad countries or countries with a high concentration of rugby, I think, you get a lot of players that can just not get the opportunity. So you are relying on a lot of luck, a lot of fortune, a lot of timing. And so, while I suddenly made a bit of a late development, I guess around 18 or 19 and got a bit quicker and got a lot taller to my current massive height.
How tall are you?
That's 5'10", I think, maybe getting shorter year by year, of course.
Surprised you didn't end up in the NBA.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's what they kept telling me. But even though that happened, it was really only through some fortunate moments and just a chain of events, really, that everything sort of lined up, all the planets lined up for me to even think of being in the All Blacks. I played in an under-18 tournament for Canterbury, which we won. We won against Justin Marshall's Southland in the final. He maintains that they were a bit fatigued after having a few big nights during the tournament, which was up in Christchurch, out at Hornby at Denton Oval. But we beat Southland in the final. They selected a tournament team. I got chosen in that tournament team and to play outside Justin Marshall. We had a game at Rugby Park in Christchurch, but I was selected by Vance Stewart. So Vance Stewart, former All Black lock and Canterbury lock, chose me in that team. The following year, he was coach of the New Zealand under-19s, and I went up to the trials there as a no-name, and all of a sudden sort of got in the team, thanks to Vance Stewart believing in me again. And, you find that, and when people sometimes criticise coaches for showing too much faith and loyalty, they're going to have their views on people as players and as people. And for whatever reason, I'm very thankful that Vance saw in me the player that he wanted as his number 10. So, South Island under-18, New Zealand under-19, and then, as luck would have it, he got the job as Canterbury coach. And my timing was pretty lucky there as well. Greg Coffey had been kind of the long-term 10. It had a bit of competition with a few other players over the years, but he was kind of established himself as the top dog there at 10, and he was coming to the end of his career. And so Vance Stewart coming in as coach, and next thing I'm in the Canterbury team. And I owe Vance massively for just 3 incremental steps as part of my rugby journey, which without any of those 3, without one of those 3, I doubt whether I might have had the chance to make the All Blacks.
Yeah, every athlete I talk to, inevitably there's a coach who believed in them at a critical moment. You've just described the way Vance believed in you and backed you, not once, not twice, 3 times, multiple times. What was he like as a coach? And was there anything that he did specifically that kind of brought things out more in you that you didn't know you were capable of, or that allowed you to live up to what he saw in you?
I would describe Vance as progressive. My first year in the Canterbury team, he was the coach, so I hadn't experienced previous coaches. But I think he was a new breed of coach. Up till then, I think rugby coaching in general, this was the New Zealand way. We were so passionate about rugby, but it was very prescriptive as a coaching method. The team was run by the coach, who dictated everything tactically, as well as technically, etc. And so the coach, the captain, and to a certain extent, the fly half, if he or she, in those days it was mostly he, obviously, but was experienced enough. So that was it, and that was the kind of prescriptive way that rugby was coached, and it had worked really, really well. And then, it's evolved a lot since then, and I think Vance was right at the forefront, certainly in Canterbury, of that kind of movement to kind of player, not player power, but player ownership, player responsibility, really. If you've got as rugby accelerated and still does, you're asking players to make quick decisions, be lucid on the field, and make those decisions and then implement or execute quickly. And you can't do that if you've just got a team of automated sort of players. So, everyone's making those decisions, and everyone's to be encouraged to improve their own decision-making capability. So, within that leadership spread in rugby, and, I really felt I was lucky coming into the Canterbury team when I did. Not only did we have pretty progressive coaches, but we also had, for example, Vaxseat and a group of senior players who were gnarled veterans, and they were demanding in terms of their standards, and they were tough, but they were very, very welcoming to young players. So we had the likes of Rob Penny, Chris England, Stu Lowe, Shane Philpott for the backs, Graham Bishop. So we had those kind of older, more experienced players who were, just didn't come down hard on the younger guys. You knew you had to perform, you had to earn your respect, but you weren't kind of inhibited by sort of having to, do your kind of induction in a hard way. And we had a bunch of young guys coming through. Angus Gardner, Mark Hammett, Matt Sexton, Mark Mayhoffler, and some by Matson, etc. Daryl Gibson, Justin Marshall. And those young players coming through were nurtured and encouraged by the older players. And I don't think that was necessarily always the way in rugby, but the way rugby had been, knew no better, knew no differently, and it worked in that era. But the context was changing, and I felt lucky to be a part of a team. I didn't realise at the time how lucky I was, but part of a team that was evolving along with kind of society, really. And then in between the older players and the new ones, there was a middle group of players who were also really welcoming, and it was the ultimate achievement for me. I would have absolutely died happy being able to represent Canterbury. I was red and black through and through, through my whole life. And I couldn't think of anything greater than representing Canterbury. And I got to do that in Ashburton in 1993. And I was playing, alongside Dion Kerr and Kelly Hansen, Wiremu Monso, Kose Sanafu. This is just the back line, of course. I only care about the back line. Graham Bishop, obviously, Shane Philpott. So Paula Bale. And it was just an absolute dream for me. But, when I look back, how lucky I was really to be in a group that was as welcoming at the same time as being, demanding. You've got to be serious and you've got to give it a go. But especially as a young fly half, when you're kind of supposed to be trying to call the shots, immensely confidence boosting to feel you've got you've got the backing of the senior players to go out there and try and call the shots with all these experienced players around you.
Mehrts, there is so much in there that I want to see, like, how much of it I can kind of capture and reflect back to you and make sure I've understood. And I've got, of course, more questions. But one of the things that I heard you talk about is the coach and how much loyalty and faith the coach had in you. And you mentioned that, nowadays we can criticize coaches sometimes for showing too much faith and loyalty. And I have a question about that I'm going to come back to. So please hold me to account for coming back to it. But there's a thing there of like, the coach has to believe in you. Then I heard you talk about how you had these veterans, and the veterans operated at basically the premise of this podcast, which is they operated at the intersection of high standards and high care. They had high expectations of you. They needed you to fulfill those expectations, and they did it in a way that was through a lens of belonging and welcoming and support, rather than through a lens of aggression or antagonism or exclusion. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing I heard you talk, I heard you talk about kind of 50 things, but the third thing I want to kind of reflect back and touch on is you talked about the shift towards progressive coaching that was happening around the time that you were coming up. And the shift away from the coach and maybe the captain being kind of tactically prescriptive towards player autonomy and ownership on field during the game. And I think it's hard, we talk about this a lot on the podcast, on the Crusaders Leadership Program with folks like Smithy, Wayne Smith and Robbie Deans and folks like that. And I think it's really hard for us today to imagine what a radical shift that was.
Just from my experience of kind of a little bit of that transition, I think the previous model in rugby was that the individual just had responsibility to the group, which there always is, but there was just an overwhelming responsibility to the group. You sacrifice anything to do with your own, I guess, ambition for the good of the team. And that, worked really, really well. The All Blacks in New Zealand rugby's got a tremendously successful history. I think the feeling I get, assessing in hindsight is that it progressed to a point in the early to mid 90s where it was just player having responsibility to one another. So, I have responsibility to my teammate, but they also have responsibility to me. And it wasn't just completely, didn't feel like you were completely sacrificing yourself just for the higher cause, which was the team. It just felt like there was genuine responsibility shared amongst one another, and the interdependence that existed in rugby was just, I guess, enhanced by that feeling of responsibility, and that, there was that they wanted you to do well for your own sake, as for your own ambitions, that the coach wanted all individuals to perform well for themselves as well as for the collective effort. And particularly prominent, I think, in that has always been Wayne Smith. So while at the start, the first few years with Vance, Stewart and with Aussie McLean were fantastically successful compared to probably recent years that Canterbury had, and a lot of changes of coaches and a lot of fluidity in terms of the team selections and whatnot, and it was hard to get consistency. And then suddenly we had this group. There were, I think 3 years maybe that Vance coached, and we won the Ranfurly Shield, so we had some success which buoyed the team a little bit. We had a good mix of the whole range of experience of players, older players, younger players, and a group in the middle, and it was pretty evenly balanced. And the success helped, of course, but there was just that feeling that you want to get the best out of every single player, and players are different in terms of their approach and their motivation, and it's not just a one size fits all. And individualities were starting to get more accepted and respected, I think, in that context. And when you had a captain for me like Rob Penny, who was at the same time one of the toughest players I've played with, but at another time one of the most gregarious and childishly amusing players I've ever played with as well. Awesome fun to be around and to be touring with, and you just couldn't help but enjoy, even though there were games with pressure on and we had losses and we had wins, but you couldn't help but enjoy the experience of being in that team. And so, Vance and Aussie as the coaches were right at the forefront of, I guess, being able to invest faith in the back seat and in the senior players to, I guess, keep the discipline in the team, but in a nice way. And they didn't so much step back, but they just, allowed players to feel like they were, getting that ownership, and were being given responsibility. And it was that was my experience in the team, was just that very much. The coaches and the senior group wanted us to succeed for ourselves as individuals as well as for the group. And then, like I say, Wayne Smith's been prominent in that whole kind of modernising of the rugby coaching method, and with Gilbert and Enoka as well. And he brought Gilbert in very, very early. And, Smithy's always been one of those coaches who is almost, he puts players' ambitions and goals probably ahead of his own. His own ambitions, while he's fiercely competitive and wants the team to win, it's not for himself. It's for the group and for players. So, he brought Gilbert in. The first thing Gilbert did, and he came in. We knew he was a nice guy. We'd met him a few times before with Smithy, and he's got a teaching background, so he's a very caring guy. He's got a good sports background. He was captain of the New Zealand volleyball team, a psychology degree, etc. But he would come in at the start of the season or at the start of the campaign, and he would be the one directing a meeting, but of all the players in the squad. And it was right at the start to work out what values we'd live by, what our collective ambition was, what our individual ambitions were, what we wanted to get out of the season individually and as a group. And he would collate all that material, and he would drive the conversation, and he would ensure that everybody was heard. There are obviously naturally some peacocks in the team. I wouldn't say necessarily that was Justin Marshall, but he and I were obviously pretty vocal compared to some of the quieter guys at times. But Gilbert would make sure everybody had a voice, everybody got asked to contribute, and he'd walk in with a whiteboard in the early days and bare feet. We know we're sitting down to have a pretty big session in the context of our team, of the season. This is how we're going to live. This is what's going to drive us for the season. And Bert walks in his bare feet, which was very disarming. If you were starting to feel, oh, this is going to be a bit of a corporate session or a bit intimidating or whatever, you're under no illusions straight away. No, this is natural. This is very real. This is very human. And he would just bang, take notes. And it didn't matter how stupid you might have thought you sounded by throwing something out there. He would note it down, and he'd have all these words here. And then he'd go away and do all the work, crunching up everything that people had come up with, and he'd distill it down into probably exactly what we wanted and what we needed out of what we'd said to him, and probably a lot of what he'd teased out of us as well. To be honest, we all thought we were, but they were getting exactly what a team needed and wanted. And so, you felt you had that responsibility. If you've stuck your hand up at the start of the season and say, hey, I think punctuality is an important thing for this group because blah, 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 whatever. It's just a respect for others, respect for your teammates making effort. And if you're late, you're letting them down a little bit as well as yourself. And it's personal standards, that sort of thing. Well, if you put your hand up to say punctuality is important and, you're not hopefully going to be the one who's late ever. So it was that sort of responsibility we were taking on board.
Oh my gosh, so much goodness in there. A couple of things I want to touch on. One is what I'm hearing you talk about is the Crusaders today talk a lot about the concept of me, we, that Muhammad Ali poem. And I'm hearing you talk about the healthy tension between those two. I'm here to give to the team, to support the team, and I have to look after myself and what do I want to achieve here? And it sounds like that there's a bunch of the navigation kind of that. The second thing I'm hearing is that process that Gilbert used, and it's something that I've noticed in the work I've been fortunate to do with the Crusaders, is and something that I think is a challenge for organizational values programs worldwide in any kind of organization, is if we're doing it because we feel like we're supposed to have a set of values and we need to say we've done it, which is more common than we like to imagine, then it's never going to have any impact on behavior. And the most essential ingredient in any kind of values exercise is that there is a felt ownership of them and a common commitment to living into them every single day. And what I just heard you describe in Gilbert's process is this is not we need to have a nice poster we can put on the wall. This is the genuine, I'm in my bare feet. I'm here with you. I want to hear from you and I'm going to actually reflect it back to you. And if you say it, you better be prepared to own it because it's a kind of a big thing there. And so that, authenticity is such an overused word, but it is kind of that, like, the realness of it that makes it so powerful, because so many organizations and teams do values exercises that don't then impact behavior at all. And so that's something that I noted. And then the third thing, I heard you say the Peacocks, and I heard you talk about Justin Marshall, and you talked about Justin Marshall previously, and that you beat him. And he claims that it was a few big nights out. But you and I know, Mehrts, that championships, champion behavior is behavior every moment of every day. It's not just what happens on the field. So even if it was the nights out, sorry, Marshy, that's kind of on you. Tell me a little bit about, like, some of the relation. You talked before about these guys feeling such a kind of brotherhood with them that you'd go out for a beer or a water, but you and I both know it was a beer. Let's be honest. Tell me a little bit about some of those relationships. And honestly, like, I'd love a story that would be wildly inappropriate in today's terms. We know we're operating in a different time now than we were then, but what was it like for you building those relationships with those guys at that time? Tell me a story, Mert.
You've got players from a lot of different backgrounds, but they've had a lot of similar experiences. So there's that commonness and that sense of sort of unity that comes from going through similar experiences, but at the same time, very, very different people, different personalities all over the show. And one of the enjoyable things was touring and getting to know people's little quirks, And I spent a lot of time rooming with Justin. Like, we had a lot of similarities in our background, but then some big differences too. We're both from small town New Zealand. He's from Matota and I'm from Tuahiwi. But I didn't live the same kind of life. I mean, he was out of school at 15 or 16 and working in what they call the big white university, the meatworks down at Matota. So he was working in the real world, working with men and women, and playing rugby in the same sort of social circles as that as well. Whereas I, was playing under 14 underweights, and then under 15s and under 16s, and going up the grade like that. So, but at the same time, both from small town New Zealand, both probably of us, I think, felt a little bit out of place when we got into, say, the All Blacks, and it was when professionalism had just started, and there were a lot more corporate commitments, and suddenly, you're wearing suit and ties everywhere and going to functions and stuff like that. And I think he and I probably both felt a little bit out of place here, little country kids, dressed up in suits. So, but I spent so much time over the years with Justin, and like I say, just getting to know one another's little differences and finding comfort in knowing people as well. I loved rooming with Marshy. I would jump up in the morning and be down to breakfast all the time, but he never wanted to get up quickly. These days he still does. He'll be out playing paddle or squash at 6 o'clock in the morning or whatever. But, in those days on tours, he was, happy to get as much sleep as he could, and basically rock up to the team meeting 5 minutes beforehand, and jump on the bus and go to training. So I'd zoom away from my room and I'd get down to breakfast and enjoy the buffet there. And, once I stopped training, I still kept enjoying the buffet, but you see the result. But I'd leave Justin in the room, and I'd know that he wasn't coming down to breakfast, but I'd also know that he would have ordered from room service a few slices of toast. And so every time he'd go on tour, he'd buy himself a toaster. But then inevitably, the next tour we go on, he'd forget to bring his toaster that he'd bought on the last tour, so he'd buy another toaster. So I don't know, he'd probably got 100 odd toasters at his place that he'd bought on all these tours. But he would be up there, he'd be walking around like Hugh Hefner in his kind of, his hotel robe, walking around the room with his little toaster. He's just bought. The box is still sitting on the bench somewhere, and he's just got his toast there. And I've come back from having a buffet breakfast. So it's just, those little things that you get to know about one another, and whether you look back on rooming with Tana, and I enjoyed rooming with Tana as well, and I was one of the few that could, because I could sleep through his snoring. A lot of others couldn't. So Tana was all the little differences. Jonah, I know that's not in the Canterbury context, but Jonah was good to room with. He'd always find a Tongan, there'd always be a Tongan uncle. Everywhere in the world, he'd find a Tongan uncle who would come along and bring him Tongan chop suey. And this big bowl of Tongan chop suey would sit in the corner of the room all week. We'd sort of have a crack at it in between meals or whatever, after training and stuff like that. The room would stink of this stuff. It's and he was kind of not a what's it called? Not an insomniac, but he certainly wouldn't be able to go to sleep at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night. He was often up, sort of lying there till 2, 3 in the morning. So just those little things that you learn about players in the Canterbury context. I was normally rooming with, say, a Mark Meyerhoffler or Tumbai Matson. Bubsy Meyerhoffler was probably a bit more early to bed than most of the other guys. So you knew that when you were rooming with Bubsy, he's the nicest man in the world. You'd probably have a cup of tea ready for you before you even woke in the morning, which was essential. If you're rooming with Blackadder, your first priority, not to get yourself ready for training, was to get Blackadder a tea, milk and 2 sugars. But Bubsy would probably, but you knew if you're rooming with Bubsy Meyerhoffler that, out of respect to him as well, because he was the nicest man in the world and he'd do anything for anyone, that out of respect to him, you don't want to be, up too late watching movies and stuff, because he's asleep quite early. So all those little things that you get to know about and get to respect, just, you're getting exposed in really close quarters to someone who's quite different from yourself, and having to adjust yourself a little bit to be respectful and to be understanding and accepting of what their little quirks are, same as they are for you.
Thank you so much. I feel well prepared for the inevitable moment when I'm going to have to room with Blackadder. Tea, milk, 2 sugars. I'm ready. I'm ready for my moment.
I probably shouldn't say this story about Todd. Sorry, Kyla, but one of my funniest moments when I'd first made the team with Canterbury, and I was rooming with Todd, and his wife Priscilla is absolutely fantastic. And I probably shouldn't say this, but I've woken up the first morning rooming with Toddy the night before, and he's just woken us both up with this enormous fart, and it's just seriously like a bugle. And I didn't even know at the time whether he was awake or not, but I've started giggling. He's obviously heard me in my bed across from him giggling away, and he's sort of must have turned. I heard him rustling and turning around and sort of going, "Is the jug on, Priscilla?" And it's so there I was, the proxy for Priscilla, up and making him a cup of tea.
I love it. I mean, this is the thing, right? Like you're in these environments where there is no hiding. There is no hiding from each other. Like it doesn't matter what's whether it's the going to bed early, whether it's a cup of tea, whether it's a fart, like you're right on top of each other. There's not, you kind of you're either going to accept each other as you actually are, or it's not going to work. Were there ever any situations where it didn't work, or any situations where you had friction and had to work through it and overcome it?
I think that, I mean, we were pretty rudimentary in terms of our knowledge of how people operate and how to encourage individuality in a team context then. And, they've obviously done a huge amount of work on that in subsequent years. And I think, they probably look pretty closely at who they room with one another, who they put together in rooms when they go on tour now. And is this, complementing what that player does? Or, at times they probably have quite different personalities just to encourage that kind of awareness of people's differences and that sort of thing. But I think by and large they're looking predominantly at performance. What's going to help your performance the best? How will you live this week to get the best performance out of you? And in other words, who's your best roommate going to be to help you achieve your best this week? So, they'll have a lot more knowledge about that. But in the past, we swapped around, we mixed around. But there was one year where it must have been when Wayne Smith was coaching, and we did a review at the end of the year. Maybe it was 2000 or 2001. And Gilbert and Enoka was collating the review. So all the players got to, assess other players and this, that, and the other. And Gilbert came and had to have a word to me. He said, "Look, we've got to have a chat about this." He said, "Because the reviews that have come in," he said, "have been a bit mixed." He said, and this is a bit confronting because you're going along thinking, I mean, everyone thinks they're a good team man and whatnot, and and then it's pretty confronting when you've got someone sitting there telling you, okay, maybe your perception of yourself is not quite the perception shared with everyone. So he said, "Look, firstly, on the positive side, the young players coming into the group think you're really welcoming. They enjoy the fact that you make them feel worthy or whatever." And that was something I really, I guess, prided myself on after the experience that I'd had both in Canterbury and in the All Blacks. But he said the older players don't think you're probably a good example to the younger players in terms of your training. And for whatever's going on in the background, you're quite an intense person. And without trying to make excuses for myself, I'd gone through a situation with a separation, and then a son had arrived after we'd separated, and I was trying to sort of juggle that. And like I say, it's not an excuse, but that was kind of my context at the time. And Bert said, there are probably a number of guys in the team who wouldn't want to, like you as a mate, but they wouldn't want to be in a room with you all week because, either you're pretty intense or you're pretty harsh or pretty cynical about things, and those sorts of things. So that was pretty confronting. So at the same time, his delivery was, of course, not condoning anything, but just saying, look, we want to give you this feedback for you to be able to improve, for you to be better, for you to achieve better, and be a better part of the team. So, it was delivered with care. No icing on it, but still delivered with care. So there were those moments where, everyone had to take a good look at themselves. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people had to take a good look at themselves. And I think that's part of the All Blacks' success, is that constant self-evaluation and that brutal at times self-evaluation, and in the quest to get better.
What was it like to receive that feedback, and what did you do with it? I imagine being on the receiving end, and I'll just tell you, like, what would have happened for me is first I would have shut down, my system would have just shut down, and then I would have been scrambling, what can I reach for to blame this on or whatever. And it would have maybe taken me a minute to go, okay, it's being delivered with love. There's an opportunity to get better here. It would have been a bit of a journey for me to make some use out of feedback like that. What was the journey like for you?
Oh, it was pretty immediate, to be fair. I mean, that's the beauty and the luxury, I guess, of having someone like Bert Enoka, that there's just full trust in him that if he's delivering it, it's true. If he's delivering it, it's for your best, and the way it's being delivered is in the best manner possible. And yeah, you want to move forward quickly and go, okay, well, what do I do to be better? And if it's him helping you in that process, fine. If it's just you having a bit of an awareness about it and going away and working on some things and continually checking in to see how I'm doing, then that's what you got to do as well. But I'm quite sure that there were positives and negatives for everyone. I kind of thought I was sort of toddling along thinking, team guy, bit of a funny guy, likes being a smart ass, gets a few laughs here and there. No harm in that. But, I hadn't realised, I guess, how cynical and maybe sarcastic or whatever I'd had slowly become, or rapidly become, whatever it was. And so, look, I mean, I think straight away you appreciate that, if it wasn't something that could be overcome, you wouldn't be getting that message. You'd be getting a message saying, thanks very much and good luck with the rest of your career and life. So, you've just got that trust in a guy like Gilbert. And that doesn't come immediately either. I mean, Gilbert had been working with I'd been lucky enough to have him in Canterbury since probably, the mid-90s, and to know him. And so, I guess I would be probably one of the players in the team at that stage that he would know the best and would probably be able to be the absolute bluntest with as well. I would like to think, but so he probably tailored his approach depending on how much mutual trust there was between him and the player, and how much knowledge there was. But no, it was straight onto it, like you're looking at a video of the game and having your mistakes pointed out and going, well, and this is how you improve.
Can I just say, one of the things that I talk about all the time on my programs is the idea that feedback is a gift. It's information that you didn't have, and it's up to you what you choose to do with it. But it's information that exists whether you know it or not. And the only way you can have a choice to do something about it is to receive it. And what I just heard from you is not only a few things that make this story so powerful. One, that you had the relationship with Gilbert such that when it came time for him to give you that feedback, you went into that conversation with total trust that the only reason he's doing it is because he cares about you and he wants to see you improve. Number two, that his delivery is as clear as can be. We often talk about in the Brene Brown Dare to Lead program, clear is kind. And so often I think leaders, as leaders, we can dance around, beat around the bush to try to soften the blow for people. And when we soften the blow, often we don't give the actual information that is the necessary information to drive that change. And then the third thing I heard in that is your massive openness and self-awareness to take that feedback on board, accept it, not blame others for it, and then act on it to drive behavior change. Which, without those three ingredients, the foundation of trust, the clarity in delivery, and then the openness and willingness to accept it, feedback conversations fall flat and don't kind of drive behavior change. Does that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how well I implemented any change either, because not long after that, there was a change in the coaching staff at the All Blacks as well. And I guess Gilbert would be better placed than I am to be able to say, okay, this is what Mehrts kind of did, and this is the improvement that we saw, or not. So I don't know. It certainly I wouldn't think change overnight, because I was in habits, like we all get into habits and whatnot. But looking back, I know that Bert, with his psychology background and knowledge and stuff, it's not just while it might have seemed an easy, natural conversation, I'm sure there were terms that he used. I'm sure he avoided saying, you need to do this. And it would have been more like, look, it's important for you to, if you want to be the player that you think you can be, to do this, or if you want to be an important part of the team and a positive influence on the team, to do this, rather than, hey, you should be doing this, So I'm sure there would have been subtle language selections that he made that I wouldn't have been aware of, but still, I was shocked. I just didn't have that view of myself, and so yeah, it was shocked, but there was never any thought and of disbelief, or oh no, that's not quite right, or what does it matter anyway, or anything like that. So I'm always very thankful that I got that message from Bert.
It is such a gift when people are willing to share that kind of information with us, especially the stuff that's harder for us to hear. So many people would just avoid delivering those messages, and the only way we learn those things is when someone's willing to share those with us. And Gilbert obviously did that for you. I want to read for you a line from the Andrew Mehrtens Wikipedia page that kind of speaks to this situation, but in a little bit of a different way. What it says is New Zealand rugby has had few players who have won such wide popularity and affection as Andrew Mehrtens, who in a 12-year career at first class level became a national figure rather than simply an icon of his Canterbury province. I'm led to understand that you in your career, which was before my time in New Zealand, that you were beloved, that you were seen not just as a good player, but as someone who really people really admired and respected and cared about. And I hear the challenge you faced from Gilbert. And I guess my question is, what do you think it is in you or in your behavior and how you showed up that, and I don't know. I'm assuming based on our previous conversations so far that you're going to dismiss all this and make it like it's nothing. So let's accept for a moment that it is something, and maybe park the tall poppy to the side for just the answer to this one question. What do you think it is in you that allowed people to see themselves reflected in you or feel that they were connected to you in this way?
I don't think I seemed anything special, you know what I mean? And I wasn't big and strong. I mean, I was tremendously good looking, obviously, but I wasn't I wasn't big, strong, and incredibly quick. You know what I mean? So people see Jonah and they see a rugby superstar. People see Sean Fitzpatrick and they see a guy who's captained the All Blacks for a long time, carries himself with a lot of dignity, a huge amount of gravitas, and so he should. And so they look at him and they see an international rugby star, a person of authority in the game. I think they looked at me and maybe they heard me when I got interviewed and stuff, and I always had plenty to say for myself. And I think I genuinely felt like the kid from next door who had got a winner wish and got dropped into an All Blacks jersey and put in the All Blacks team, or dropped into a Canterbury jersey and put out on the field with the Canterbury team. I had some skills and I think I brought something to the team, but it wasn't something really that probably nobody else could do. You know what I mean? There are players who are faster than anyone else or stronger than anyone else and that sort of thing. You know, Christian Cullen's a good example, just unbelievable player. But I've played with some incredible fullbacks as well. So I don't mean any disrespect to them, but you know, Cully at the time was kind of untouchable, and you see Christian Cullen, you go, oh, he's untouchable. I couldn't do what he could do. Nobody could do what he could do. I don't think they saw that with me, and that's, you know, I loved that. I loved being the kid next door. It's like people felt protective of me. You know, not everybody liked me. I'm sure there were there were plenty of Carlos Spencer supporters, for example, and they would never see anything good about me, and there are a lot of supporters of me who would never see any good in Carlos, which, you know, it speaks to the passion and the parochialism, I guess. But yeah, I think people just saw a kid who was excited as hell to be in this environment and enjoying himself. And importantly, I was far from perfect. You know, I made plenty of mistakes, missed a lot of tackles. I like to think I you know, helped create the spectacle of the game by missing tackles and allowing tries to be scored. But I think people just saw like a normal kid. I like to think they kind of saw themselves, geez, if this kid could be out there running around with Canterbury or Crusaders, the All Blacks, then I can too, you know. And that felt nice. It just felt like a kid who's had a winner wish.
Amazing. Those Tuahiwi roots, that groundedness, that connection to whakapapa, that connection to whenua, that connection to tūranga waiwai, keeping your feet on the ground that people can see this is just another human being just like me, going out and, you know, playing for maybe an extraordinary team and accomplishing together extraordinary things. And there's a connection there that I think sounds like it was something pretty special.
Another kid from Tuahiwi played in the All Blacks too, Joe Moody. I couldn't believe it when I found out he was from Tuahiwi. So, I mean, he was a couple of generations below me or behind me, but I went to Tuahiwi school with his uncle, Morris Corey. And so to have two kids from Tuahiwi who've somehow, well, he didn't win the lottery. He's a big, strong guy. He's an unbelievable prop. But really, to come from Tuahiwi and to manage to get into the All Blacks and do that was winning the lottery.
Honestly, like on a per capita basis, that's got to be the highest per capita. It's like that village in Kenya that produces all the marathon winners. It's just got to be, the most. That's where the selectors should just be looking all the time. Just go to Tuahiwi and pick from there. Mehrts, it has been such a pleasure to chat with you. I have enjoyed our conversation so much. I've learned so much from it. I've taken away so much food for thought. I could talk to you for hours because I have like 50 other questions for you. And I do want to respect your time and let you go. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. It's been absolutely great.
Kyla, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate the chance, and I talk a lot. And if you've managed to get something somewhere out of that, then well done you. It's like a needle in a haystack.
Amazing. Lots of needles in this haystack. Thank you so much for listening. What a lovely, lovely human. So many standout moments for me, but if there was one standout, if I had to pick one, it would really be the way that Gilbert Enoka delivered that feedback that he'd gotten from the other senior players. The impact he was having, like we all have aspects of the way that we behave that are kind of invisible to us and impacts from our behavior that can be invisible to us. And unless someone is willing to give us the gift of that feedback, we'll never know to do anything different. And so what I heard in there, just that foundation of the trusted relationship with Gilbert, the clarity that Gilbert delivered that information with, and then the openness that Mehrts had to receive it. What an inspiring story to tell, and what a rare situation to have, but one that I would love to see more of. Thanks again for listening. Please do let me know your feedback. I'm always grateful to hear from you. You can reach me on hello@kylakolbin.com. If you are enjoying the show, the biggest gift that you can give me is to like, follow, subscribe, hit that notification bell, all those good things to let the algorithm know that this is something you appreciate. Helps us make better episodes and get better guests for you. Thank you so much. See you next week. Hunger and Heart is brought to you by the Crusaders Leadership Programme. Whether you're coaching under fives or a professional team, we all want the same thing: to build a culture of trust, to get the best out of your people, and to grow players into leaders. The Crusaders Leadership Programme lets you get up close and personal with some of the greatest rugby legends of all time. People like Sir Wayne Smith, the Professor, Sam Whitelock, Kieran Reid. You'll connect with a global group of ambitious, caring coaches from a range of codes and backgrounds. And most importantly, you'll gain skills and techniques to drive impact and outcomes for your team. The Crusaders Leadership Programme is a 2-week high-intensity virtual experience. It is delivered exclusively online, accessible from anywhere. Hunger and Heart listeners get 10% off the full price of the program. Use the code HUNGER at checkout. You can find out more about the Crusaders Leadership Programme at crusadersleadership.com. That's crusadersleadership.com. Hunger and Heart is created by BOMA and the entire BOMA team, including Tito Bernal, Rach Engel, Hannah Hudson, Johanna Coxon, and me, Kyla Kolbin. Thanks for listening.